is forced vaccination.
Sadly, some people don't do what's best for their children unless it's mandated.
We're not zealots. We're not some people that are looking for a conspiracy or a fight.
The vaccine program, it's one size fits all.
We worry about the future.
You could have 30, 40, 50 different vaccines mandated and absolutely no accountability. You have a prescription for disaster.
I have a child, and then I follow the rules, and I damage this child. That's hard for me to understand.
I just want everybody to lay down their arms and figure out what is making them so sick.
Show us the science and give us the choice.
And we are joined now by Leslie Manookian, who is the writer and producer of this film. And Leslie, right out of the gate, let me just say congratulations on a job well done. It's truly an amazing documentary, and we're excited and honored to have you with us today.
Thank you so, so much. It's really a pleasure to be here, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity to be here.
Well, tell us about the film, break down some of the highlights, and tell us why it's a good idea for people to go see it.
Well, you know, I think it would be a surprise to anybody that there's a vaccine debate raging in this country, and not just in this country, but around the world. And I didn't really understand the debate over 10 years ago. I thought that there was really nothing to it. But I was working on Wall Street, actually living in London and working in finance, and I met somebody who told me that vaccines could cause harm. And I thought, come on, this guy's nuts. I mean, he's got to be whacked. There's something wrong with him. But he gave me a book and he told me to read it. And in the back of the book, there were over 900 references to mainstream medical literature, studies published in peer-reviewed medical literature. And I thought, gosh, you know, I really need to look into this more. And I vowed that one day after I read that book, I was going to go and figure this out for myself and look at these officials and talk to these people and look them in the eye. And I've been stunned to find out that we are actually in a situation where our kids are really sick. Over 50% of American children are chronically ill. 20% are developmentally disabled. And there's growing science that links it to vaccinations. Now, you know, who would have thought that was the case? And I certainly wouldn't have 10 years ago when I first started thinking about this issue. But the science is mounting, and we're now seeing that there's really serious cause for concern. And so we made this film because we want people to understand that the whole vaccination conversation is a conversation worth having, that there is science out there that calls into question the safety of vaccines, and we need to explore this further so we can get to the bottom of what's causing our kids to be so sick. That's really the gist of it, and we just hope that more and more people will open their hearts and open their minds and understand that there may be something going on here that we really all should care about.
Well, I think it's the best and most effective vaccination film that I've ever seen, and now we finally have something in our hands. We have an opportunity to both educate and to get people out there to do something about this. I think this will create change, you know, or affect change, if you will. And one of the things is, guys, I got to start over again. I'm sorry, because I lost my train of thought. Just come out of the clip right there. All right, sorry. All right. Ready? Go. Sorry, Leslie.
No worries.
But what we're doing is we're getting the clip ready, so it just kind of threw me off.
Don't worry.
Okay, so, all right. Well, I think this is the best vaccination film that I've ever seen, and I think we have something here that will not only educate people, but it'll also affect change as well, because this is really a splash-in-your-face wake-up call to everyone who sees it. Now, I want to play a few clips from the film. We're going to start out with a look at the rise of chronic illness as children with disabilities have now reached epidemic levels.
Is only one kind of brain and immune dysfunction that is associated with vaccination. Millions and millions of children now in America are chronically ill and disabled. And during this same time period, that the numbers of doses of vaccines have more than tripled that we're giving our children. We have seen this explosion of chronic disease and disability. And to take off the table the use of a pharmaceutical product like a vaccine as a potential cofactor in this explosion of chronic disease and disability among our children is irresponsible.
And that was Barbara Lowe Fisher. She is the president of the National Vaccine Information Center, also one of the many heroes that are featured in this amazing documentary, The Greater Good. Now, Barbara Lowe Fisher, she actually dedicated her life to this. Her son, unfortunately, fell victim to a vaccination some 30 years ago. He got the shot, he became brain damaged, and she became committed to reforming the vaccination system. Again, one of the many heroic and courageous people that are featured in this documentary. Now, tell us more about the chronic illness epidemic that we're facing right now. I mean, everywhere you look, there's children with disabilities.
Well, I don't know how old you are, Darren, but I'm 48 years old, and when I was a kid, I don't remember anybody being sick. There were no obese kids. There were no people with asthma. There were, if someone had asthma, it was extremely rare. I didn't know a single person with a peanut allergy or any kind of allergy for that matter. And today, we know from a study that was published in Academic Pediatrics last year that over 50% of American children have some kind of chronic illness or disability. So these are things like asthma, allergies, eczema, learning disabilities, speech delay, yes, autism, many other things, lupus, multiple sclerosis, arthritis, and things like this. We're even seeing these in kids nowadays. And what's interesting is that not only is there this explosion of chronic illness, but as I mentioned before in the introduction, there's actually science linking those things to the aluminum in vaccines, the mercury in vaccines, other components of vaccines, or just vaccines in general. And I think it's really critical, obviously, when you get to a point where over 50% of your kids have some chronic illness or disability, that we seriously take a hard look at this. And it's irresponsible for health authorities to be claiming that there is no connection anymore, because there's such a growing body of science suggesting that there is a link.
Well, I'm the same age as you are. I'm 45 years old, and the same with me. When I was grown up in school, it was very rare that anybody had a disability, and I went to some very big schools in Phoenix, Arizona. Now, here's something that I bet most people aren't aware of as well, but you are not allowed to sue the drug companies that manufacture the vaccines. So I guess we're finally living in the twilight zone. Big government has stepped in to protect big pharma. Meanwhile, our children remain unprotected. Here's another clip from The Greater Good.
The first thing that we learned is you can't sue the drug company that made the vaccine. Our lawyer explained to us how there was this court set up specifically to address all the vaccine injuries.
There were a lot of civil lawsuits against vaccine manufacturers, and there were some extraordinary awards because there were very devastating injuries. So the vaccine manufacturer said, this isn't profitable for us, we're not going to make vaccines anymore. So Congress stepped in and said, okay, we're going to stop lawsuits against manufacturers, and you're not allowed to sue them unless you first go through this new program that we're setting up called the Vaccine Compensation Program, or the Vaccine Court.
So the vaccine makers have immunity, and our elected or so-called elected officials, no doubt, sold out. Meanwhile, they're trying to make vaccines mandatory, and they have no accountability, zero accountability. So, this is insane. Tell us about how they set up the court system in favor or to protect Big Pharma.
Well, essentially what happened was in the early 1980s, many children were killed by the DPT vaccine or suffered permanent brain damage from the DPT vaccine. And Britain actually did a study called the National Childhood Encephalopathy Study that found out that this is what was happening, that this DPT, the diphtheria, pertussis, and tetanus vaccine was causing a tremendous amount of harm to children. And so the United States did a follow-up and found out that, yes, indeed, this was happening. And what happened was all these parents went and sued, and there were huge payouts. And so the pharmaceutical industry basically threatened the government and said, we'll stop making vaccines if you don't start protecting us. Rather than making safer products, they threatened the government, and the government actually went along with it, essentially. And what happened was Ronald Reagan signed into law something called the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act of 1986. And this law was supposed to make it easy for parents who'd had their children be injured by vaccines, make it easy for them to go and apply for compensation. But what's happened in the last 25 years since it came to be is that the table of compensable events has been gutted so that it's almost impossible to get compensated now. And what happened was they set up this program, which people call the vaccine court, where you actually have to go to if you want to claim that your child was injured by a vaccine. And the court and the whole trust fund that pays out to the families is funded by a tax that is actually levied on every single vaccine that's given in America. So people don't realize when you take your kid in to get them vaccinated, there's a 75-cent tax on every vaccination. And that 75 cents goes into this trust fund that then pays out to you or somebody else if their child is injured by a vaccine. And while the idea was that it would help make it a no-fault system, what's happened is it's just been completely corrupted in the last 25 years. And so now we've gotten to a point where the pharmaceutical industry bears zero liability. And in fact, last year, the Supreme Court ruled that even if the vaccine makers could have made a safer vaccine, you can't even sue in civil court anymore. So there is actually zero recourse. You go to the vaccine court, if you don't get any kind of suitable response, you have no other options. And as far as I know, there's no other product in the world today for which the maker bears zero liability. I mean, what incentive do they have to actually create a safer product when they have no liability? And so now we're facing a situation where literally there are hundreds of new vaccines under development and they have no liability. I mean, it's just insanity.
Yeah, we've got all these new vaccines under development, and now they have fast tracking, which is the FDA's process of speeding up the drug trials in order to get these vaccinations out there and into the public in a hurry. In fact, we have another clip. Let's play the fast tracking clip. This is about the fast tracking of Gardasil. Let's take a look.
The FDA has a particular process that's called fast tracking when there is a promising drug that comes forward. Gardasil, they had scheduled a 4-year trial, but after 15 months, they went to the FDA and said, there is nothing like this vaccine on the market. Would you please consider this for fast track? And the FDA said yes. So within 6 months, they approved it. And as soon as they had it approved, Merck said, we will no longer continue our trial. We're going to stop our trial because our drug is now approved. So therefore, we don't know the long-term side effects. We do know there have been reports of pancreatitis, reports of autoimmune disease, reports of transverse myelitis, and reports of juvenile ALS, which is uniformly fatal in adolescents.
And that was another scene from the explosive documentary, The Greater Good, which is available at InfoWarsShop.com. You can also purchase the DVD at GreaterGoodMovie.org. And Leslie, I know you're aware that here in Texas, we have Governor Rick Perry, the corrupted slime ball imbecile that he is. He actually made it mandatory. He had all the schools, he said all the schools have to give Gardasil shots. And lo and behold, we learn that he indeed has connections to the pharmaceutical industry. So there's a blatant conflict of interest here. And I wanted to get your take on not just with Rick Perry, but, you know, the revolving door